British people. High tax, high inflation, low growth, low reform. There's a word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's Starmerism.
Angela Rayner, a figure known for her feisty and often confrontational style in the House of Commons, found herself in an uncharacteristically vulnerable position as a heated exchange unfolded with Conservative MP Alex Burghart. The scene, broadcast live on national television, quickly became a focal point of political discussion, capturing a moment of raw human emotion amidst the often stifling formality of parliamentary debate. The public, accustomed to seeing Rayner as a formidable opponent for the government, was taken aback by the sight of her visibly distressed, her composure cracking under the weight of Burghart's pointed and personal attack. The atmosphere in the Commons that day was already charged. The topic of debate was a contentious piece of legislation, one that had been the subject of intense scrutiny and partisan maneuvering for weeks. Both sides of the aisle were primed for a battle, with each party's front benches ready to unleash their most cutting remarks. Rayner, as deputy leader of the Labour Party, was at the heart of the fray, her role to challenge the government's narrative and hold its ministers to account. She had been on the offensive for much of the session, her voice ringing out across the chamber as she dissected the bill's perceived flaws and criticized the government's handling of the issue. However, the tide turned when Alex Burghart, a relatively low-profile Conservative MP, rose to speak. Burghart, a former academic with a quiet, measured demeanor, was not known for theatrical outbursts. His style was one of meticulous detail and a calm, almost dispassionate delivery. This made his sudden and sharp pivot to a personal attack all the more impactful. He began his speech by addressing the policy issues at hand, but it was clear that he had a different target in mind. He spoke of the importance of decorum and respect in public life, a subtle dig at Rayner's often boisterous approach. Then he delivered his blow not with a shout, but with a series of carefully constructed, damning questions aimed directly at Rayner. He questioned her motives, her past actions, and her suitability for high office. The questions were not about policy, but about character, and they were designed to hit a nerve. The camera, fixed on the front benches, captured the moment Rayner's expression shifted. Her usual confident smirk faded, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. The room, which had been buzzing with the usual parliamentary chatter, fell into a hush. Burghart's voice, though not loud, carried a weight of authority, and his words, delivered with a cool precision, seemed to land with a physical force. He accused her of hypocrisy, of using her working-class background as a political shield while engaging in behavior he deemed inappropriate for a senior politician. He brought up past comments she had made, twisting them to suggest a lack of integrity. It was a masterclass in political humiliation, not through volume or aggression, but through a cold, calculated dismantling of her public persona. As Burghart continued, Rayner's composure began to crumble. Her eyes, usually so defiant, started to well up. She looked down, her hands clasping each other tightly on the front bench. The sight was startling. This was not the Angela Rayner the public knew, the one who famously told Boris Johnson to sit down and who sparred with him with a grin on her face. This was a woman who was clearly deeply hurt and embarrassed. The emotional response was visceral, a stark contrast to the sterile, often performative nature of parliamentary politics. It was a raw, unfiltered moment of human vulnerability, and it was playing out on live television for the entire country to see. The reaction in the chamber was a mix of shock and discomfort. Some of Rayner's Labour colleagues looked on with sympathy and anger, while a few Conservative MPs could be seen with a grim satisfaction. The speaker, a figure meant to maintain order, seemed unsure of how to intervene. The attack, while personal, was framed in the language of parliamentary debate, making it difficult to rule out of order. It was a perfectly executed political ambush, and Rayner had walked right into it. She had no opportunity to respond directly, as Burghart was still speaking, and her emotional state made it clear that she was in no position to mount a counterattack. The moment was hers to endure, and she did so with a visible, painful struggle. The subsequent media coverage was immediate and intense. Clips of the moment were shared widely on social media, with the headline "Angela Rayner CRS" becoming a trending topic. The public was divided. Some expressed sympathy for Rayner, arguing that the attack was a cruel and unnecessary personal smear. They saw Burghart's actions as an example of the worst kind of political discourse, where character assassination takes precedence over genuine policy debate. They felt that Rayner, like any person, had a right to her emotions and that her tears were a sign of her humanity, not a weakness. They pointed out that women in politics are often subjected to a different, more personal kind of scrutiny, and that Burghart's attack was a prime example of this double standard. Others, however, were less sympathetic. They argued that in the cutthroat world of politics, Rayner had to be prepared to take the heat as well as dish it out. They saw her emotional response not as a sign of her humanity, but as a sign of her unsuitability for the pressures of high office. They argued that her public persona was a carefully crafted one, and that Burghart's attack had simply exposed the cracks. They believed that a leader should be able to maintain their composure under pressure, and that her tears were a sign of a lack of resilience. The debate raged online and in the press, with pundits and commentators weighing in on the nature of political debate, the role of emotion in public life, and the double standards faced by women in power. The incident was more than just a momentary political skirmish. It was a reflection of the broader state of political discourse in the UK. The lines between policy and personality have become increasingly blurred, with politicians more often attacking each other's characters than their ideas. The rise of social media has exacerbated this trend, creating a culture of outrage and instant gratification, where a viral clip of a politician's emotional breakdown is more valuable than a substantive debate on a complex policy issue. Burghart's attack, while calculated and cruel, was also a product of this environment. He knew that a personal attack would garner more attention than a detailed critique of the bill, and he was right. The incident was a vivid illustration of how modern politics has become a spectator sport, where the goal is not to win the argument, but to land the most devastating blow, regardless of the human cost. In the aftermath, the incident had lasting consequences for both Rayner and Burghart. For Rayner, it was a moment of public vulnerability that she would have to contend with. Her supporters rallied around her, but her opponents would undoubtedly use the moment to question her strength and resilience. She would have to work to reclaim her public image as a strong, unflappable leader, a task made more difficult by the viral nature of the incident. For Burghart, the incident catapulted him from relative obscurity to national prominence. He was praised by his supporters for his bravery and his willingness to stand up to a senior Labour figure. But he was also condemned by his critics for his perceived cruelty. The incident cemented his reputation as a formidable debater, but also as a politician willing to use personal attacks to gain an advantage. Ultimately, the scene of Angela Rayner in tears, as Alex Burghart delivered his cool, calculated humiliation, was a moment that encapsulated the current state of British politics. It was a moment of raw human emotion, broadcast live for all to see, and it sparked a national debate about the nature of political discourse, the role of emotion in public life, and the challenges faced by women in positions of power. It was a reminder that behind the carefully constructed public personas and the formal procedures of the House of Commons, there are real people with real feelings, and that in the cutthroat world of politics, those feelings can be exploited for a political advantage. The incident was a stark and uncomfortable reminder that in the modern political arena, winning at all costs can sometimes come at the expense of common decency and human empathy, and that the spectacle of public humiliation can often overshadow the substance of the debate.